everyone, and welcome to this week's Trad Tasman Talk on Friday, the 3rd of July 2020. I'm Tim Wilms. It is 6 p.m. here in Melbourne.
And I am Dieuwe Boer, and it is 8 p.m. here in Auckland.
And of course, as always, we're live on the Unshackled YouTube channel and also the Right Minds YouTube channel. So say hello if you're in the live chat.
That's right, and we can see a few people in the chat already, which is good. And of course, at least I've got my stream embedded on the BFD. Is anybody coming from there? Hello as well, and I suppose shout out to our other affiliate, The Rational Rise. And if you would like a super chat, Tim's channel, the Unshackled channel, is the place to come and send through your super chats throughout the show, and we'll read them out and answer any questions. And other than that, we'll just get straight into it.
Yep. I'm coming from, well, it's now the Pariah's Republic of Victoria, you could say, where
the People's Republic of Dan Andristan has fallen and been
well, now it's getting to the stage now because we've got the 10 postcode lockdown, as it is known, as cases have continued to surge upwards, daily new active cases. So it was 66 today. It was 77 the day before. Then I think it was 64 on Tuesday, 75 on Monday, and 71 on Sunday. I probably lost track of it all. But I'll just bring down the Melbourne Lockdown Map. So this is what Dan Andrews describes as level 3 restrictions. So this means they're basically under house arrest. So as you can see, they're all in the northwest of Melbourne, and I think I said this last week on the show, but it's worth reminding the audience they're quite diverse areas of Melbourne.
Yes, we definitely talked a little bit about that last time, and part of the way they've tried to shift the blame around as well, and you managed to trace that back to was it the Meatworks one, right? And then several celebrations is a similar area there.
Well, it's come out this week that for hotel quarantine, the returning overseas travellers, the highest risk group to be carriers of the coronavirus, rather than have the police or Corrections Victoria or the ADF guard the hotel quarantine, they hired private security contractors who rorted the contracts by ghosting for they got payment from the taxpayer for shifts that were never worked. They paid some of their security guards cash in hand at a lower rate. Some of them were sleeping on the job. They had about 5 minutes training of COVID safe, and some were even sleeping with them as well.
Crazy. The security, somebody in the chat actually just asked that about the guards, and this is a comment I've just seen in your chat, which is a perfect slight little diversion before we really get stuck into the COVID, is that Maxwell didn't kill herself, and the interesting before I let you get into that, it reminded me of the Babylon Bee article. I'll just read out the headline.
Oh, yes.
FBI hires top-rated Italian bodyguard Luigi Clintonelli to protect Ghislaine Maxwell. So talking about security guards, that may be it may be good to fill people in on that before we get too much into the local news.
Yes, Ghislaine Maxwell, deceased pedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein's Madame Bacura for the child sex trafficking operation. She had disappeared off the face of the earth when he was re-arrested almost a year ago today, and when Epstein committed suicide, at least people were asking, where is she? And there was a lot of speculation about the whereabouts of Ghislaine Maxwell. Apparently, she was photographed at a burger joint in LA, but a lot of analysis of the photos said that they were doctored. There's been various media speculation reports that she's been hiding out in France, where she has citizenship, or hiding out in Israel. But no, I was still up when I got the Fox News alert last night that she'd been arrested in New Hampshire.
Yes, of all places.
Or do you know who also hid out in New Hampshire to avoid authorities? Walter White from Breaking Bad. So maybe that's where she got inspiration from.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen that, which is why I didn't get the reference, I suppose. But that's that's a funny. Maybe that's how the FBI does their investigative work at the moment. They just are like, oh, what are the tropes on the popular shows, and that's what people are going to be copying.
And I'm not sure if you were up as well, but when I got the newsletter, because we were never expecting this day to eventuate. We just thought that she disappeared and we'd never, and then she's been arrested by the FBI. It's like, wow, it's actually happened.
It did. I was almost, and my first reaction has kind of been that I thought, oh, maybe she intentionally wanted to do a deal. But it doesn't seem like that was the case, where she was definitely hiding. They definitely busted her. But of course, she will talk if she survives.
Yes, that's the counting game now. There's probably already a betting board about when she'll suicide.
Yeah. But it's difficult now, right? If they don't keep her alive, they're in real trouble. So
and they accidentally wipe the security footage again. Or perhaps if they hire the same security contractors as they did at the hotel quarantine in Victoria, maybe it could happen.
Absolutely disgraceful. No, it'll be an interesting. I mean, this is about all we know at the moment, and I'm sure this will come up again in the following weeks. So for now, we shall head back onto the coronavirus stories, because you gave me the numbers for Victoria, but I suspect in the rest of Australia it's all pretty flatlined, close to zero. In New Zealand, again, the past week we're basically having back to zero cases. And what seems to have happened is that they didn't test people in quarantine for a while to make people think they were no case, to kind of have the whole eradication, we didn't have any cases for a month thing. And then they tested all the people in quarantine, and they had a bunch of cases come up, and now it's back to zero. So it seems like our isolation has been, even though there's been a lot of criticism and there have been a lot of funny stories and scary stories of people getting out of quarantine and running up and down the country and then being tested for coronavirus, it doesn't seem to actually have come to anything in New Zealand.
Well, there was further reports today. The Herald Sun, Melbourne's News Corp paper, originally broke the story about the hotel security bonking and sleeping at the hotels. Now it's been revealed today in a follow-up that they actually let the quarantinis go out shopping and for fast food as well.
Oh, I mean, it is a joke, right? What can you say?
Dan Andrews, he's announced a judicial inquiry into how these breaches occurred, and they're using this judicial inquiry, Dan Andrews and his ministers, to basically dodge answering questions now. It's like, I'm not going to preempt the
official investigation inquiry,
but
and so on. Yeah.
Chief Health Officer, Dr. Brett Sutton, who I actually think is quite decent when it comes to giving health advice. For example, he sees through the mandating wearing of masks. He's basically conceded that masks don't work, which they don't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the thing is, he's only advising on health matters. It's Daniel Andrews who implements the law and order response. And he locked all of us down in our homes and even tried to, and I still don't forget this, tried to implement a bonking ban on partners who didn't live with
I
each
remember
other,
that.
which
Yeah.
lasted for 6 hours. Yet, no bonking ban in the quarantine hotels. There was a satire article today in one of our popular satire websites, Double Bay Today, which said that Daniel Andrews has limited hotel quarantine orgies to 5 people.
Yeah. You at this point it's almost like, you know, the satire could be run as the front page stories, because that does sound like it would be almost believable in the current environment. And it's the case with a government that can't run a quarantine. The government can't keep a few hundred people securely in a hotel or wherever they're holed up. And these are the people who are supposed to be keeping you safe from deadly viruses. These are the people who are supposed to be, making sure that everybody's life goes according to plan, and they're going to provide you with your healthcare and your education and all of the necessities of life. And time and time again, these are the people who screw up.
And Dan Andrews has still got the nerve to go back to wagging his finger at us. He's like, oh, I might need to lock down more postcodes. I might need to lock down every postcode. We need people to do the right thing. And people rightfully point out, you're the one who let 10,000 Black Lives Matter protesters out and just shrugged your shoulders.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the one who couldn't manage basic hotel quarantine. Why should we respect your authority anymore?
And that's exactly the way people are going to react now, because it was all shown up to be a farce anyway. They would not actually enforce their own rules against their against their favored groups, their favored events. They wouldn't enforce their rules, and it happened basically on the last day here in New Zealand. There's a similar situation where if they tried to reinstitute a lockdown, the number of people who are going to say, well, what's the point, because you're going to exempt all of your buddies, all of your particular interest groups, all of your pet causes are going to get away with whatever they want to do.
And they're all Labour voting electorates, both at
Yeah,
the
of
state and
course.
federal level, which are locked down. But Dan Andrews, he's made sure they're going to be taking care of $1,500 payments to those who can't work because they're affected by the coronavirus. And they're also getting 2 weeks worth of essential items for free. And Victoria is on the path to bankruptcy, it looks, with Dan Andrews basically just promising, creating a welfare state within a state in our federation. Basically.
And when we've had numbers again increase, we've got 200,000 confirmed to be on the dole now, essentially, and a lot of the goodies, a lot of the money is going to keep rolling for the next 3 months until after the election. And at that point, we're expecting to see all of these numbers double. And it's basically, it's still looking like the depression 2.0 is still something that we're looking at in New Zealand, even though there's no renewed lockdown in sight. There's a lot of angst about the borders because New Zealand's economy had been built up to rely on foreign labor. So if the foreign laborers and temporary workers aren't coming in constantly, then a whole bunch of industries are set up for a lot of pain.
Well, our state borders, the states and territories who had closed their borders, Tasmania, Queensland, South Australia, Northern Territory, they were and still are scheduled to reopen their borders in July, but they've revised it to not open them up to Victorians. And New South Wales, they never had a border closure with Victoria, but they have banned people who are in those lockdown hotspots coming to New South Wales, and have threatened them with $11,000 fines and 6 months jail. And because the lockdown was announced Tuesday afternoon, but as you can see from the graphic that I've got here, it came into effect 11:59 July the 1st. So from Tuesday, Thursday, July the 2nd, and there was actually people fleeing interstate to Sydney, and they've been busted at the airports and at the train stations. The refugee flow from Victoria has actually begun now, and this afternoon, Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk, she's advised her Border Patrol to stop trucks coming into Queensland and check them if they're not carrying any Victorians in them, which... So we're worried about people smuggling operations from Victoria to Queensland.
Yeah, what a strange, wonderful world we're living in right now. May 2020 continue to be more bizarre by the month. If you had told me in January that by July we'd be looking at the police stopping interstate people smuggling in Australia, I would have thought it to be the most unbelievable of the lot.
And obviously, we've just had the AFL season restart, which has always been centred in Melbourne. 10 of the 18 teams are based in the greater Melbourne metro area. They're now going to be fleeing the state. No AFL games will take place.
The games must go on. The games must go on.
So there's going to be what they term travel bubbles. There's going to be one in southeast Queensland and also one in WA as well. Western Australia, they don't have a date to reopen their borders. They've got what's termed a hard border closure, which means nobody's allowed in. But it's proving quite popular there. Mark McGowan, the Labor Premier of Western Australia, he's still got a 90% approval rating, as does the hard border closure, and he's less than a year away from his re-election bid, so he's not going to budge. So those businesses in WA, especially the fly-in, fly-out miners, they're just not being heard at the moment because Mark McGowan's like 90%. I love that. I don't care about anything else.
Yeah, and we see a similar situation in New Zealand with sort of the governance by polls, and as long as the poll numbers look good, nothing's going to happen. And once the poll numbers start to go down, then you see some trouble. So we talked about the poll last week in New Zealand, and then we see this week, for instance, the health minister, David Clark, has resigned, and he was the one, which was the thing we talked about last week, was he had essentially dobbed in or thrown the Director General of Health under the bus. So Ashley Bloomfield is the one who had fronted up to the media every single day and done, did all the show and all the talking, and the health minister himself was incapable, and he got in trouble a bunch of times for going mountain biking. And time again, he was not asked to resign. In fact, he tried to offer his resignation. At one point, it was declined. And now that he finally committed the ultimate sin of throwing the one of the saints of the coronavirus recovery under the bus, that was the final blow, and he has resigned. And conveniently, essentially on the day that Parliament was over, more or less, the school holidays start this week, and his job has been taken over by a different minister, Katie Hopkins, who's basically got half the portfolios in the Labour Party because there's nobody else competent enough to handle it. So it's been juggled in such a way that it looks to be kind of a decisive action and a real punishment, but it comes at the end where it doesn't matter anymore because we're now 11 weeks from the election.
Well, we had today in New South Wales, you recall that one of the scandals during the stay-at-home orders that were in Victoria and New South Wales, that Don Harwin, who was the New South Wales Arts Minister, he had travelled to and from his Sydney apartment to his holiday home on the Central Coast, and he was busted by newspaper photographers, and he was fined by New South Wales Police and forced to resign from cabinet. He decided to challenge his fine, and it got thrown out by the Gosford Magistrates Court yesterday. So he's been reinstated to Arts Minister in the cabinet. So as people were saying back then, Don is bad. Now Don is good again. He's always been a key factional ally of the Premier Gladys Berejiklian. So of course she was happy to have him back since he'd been cleared of
all wrongdoing.
Yeah, and basically since everyone's forgotten about that story now, and so they can just say, "Yep, he's been cleared now by an independent court," and so can have him back in.
Yeah, independent.
Meanwhile,
and obviously, any of these cases that are being considered now, in light of the BLM protests being allowed and various other inconvenient events, I suspect the courts are throwing out a lot of these for the people who are willing to challenge them.
And this is obviously, it's a high-profile politician who's got the means to challenge them, but it does set somewhat of a precedent. And this is what I've said, because the courts are backlogged. There's still a good chance that in Victoria or New South Wales, all of these fines could be struck out by the courts. And Victoria Police,
very likely. I would say it's very likely.
Yeah, in the lockdown zones, they're now threatening and have issued out fines. On the first day of the lockdown yesterday, they issued 7 fines, and they've got booze bus style checkpoints in those 10 postcodes, basically saying, "What's your business here?" Meanwhile, I mentioned that the Andrews government ministers, they're trying to avoid answering questions about who is responsible for arranging the hotel quarantine. We noticed that Daniel Andrews, when the outbreak spike, the hotspots were rising, because he was keen during the lockdown to front every press conference and grandstand about how we all needed to do the right thing, but he's been sending out the health bureaucrats, whether it be Dr. Brett Sutton or his deputy Annalise Van Diemen, and on the day, on the morning that hotel quarantine story broke, Brett Sutton was sent out, and he was asked about the hotel quarantine arrangements, and he basically said, "It was not my decision. I had no part in the decision," basically throwing Andrews under the bus. And I think that was mighty satisfying to see, because, as I've said, I don't mind Brett Sutton, but during that press conference, it looked like he had, just had enough of the politics and didn't like being wheeled out there. It's like, fine, you're going to wheel me out there. I'm going to throw you under the bus. But the state health minister today, Jenny Mikakos, she was asked how was this hotel quarantine arrangement made, and she said it wasn't her department, Department of Health and Human Services. She actually said it was the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions. So she gave the most away, I think, because people are speculating that she's to blame. And just going through the ministers here, the most high-profile minister here is Martin Pakula. He was previously the Attorney General during Dan Andrews' first term. He's been a Victorian Labor hack for many years, very smarmy. So I don't mind him being thrust back into the spotlight for a bit. But I will take the opportunity now to go through the national figures, and then go to the state geo map. So this is the
Australian charts every time.
Yeah. So we've got as you can see here, no more deaths, but you can see the people in intensive care. That's risen to 5. 4 of those are in Victoria. 24 hospitalizations now. 20 of those are in Victoria. And you can see basically that rise in the curve there. It's nowhere near what it was back in March, but it's all Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
And the testing blitz continues. Jenny Mikakos today, she said that over 1,000 people in those hotspots, because they're going door to door now, had refused a test, and she said a lot of them based it on conspiracy theories that coronavirus was a hoax.
Yeah, and that those numbers are only going up. Those numbers are only going to go up and up and up.
But in the same press conference, she put forth a theory, and she was keen to say that this is just a theory at this stage. And I'm surprised that a government health minister would put out a theory like this, that a lot of the cases in the northwest could be the result of one single super spreader. So there's this one individual going around infecting everybody. That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me. What I said right at the beginning of the show is any excuse will do. Anything they can do to try and distract from the fact that these are the ultra diverse labor strongholds where people seem to have trouble understanding and following instructions. I'll get the geo infographic up now. So as you can see there, northwest, the stupid map, the bright red there in the northwest. So in the bright red, that's the city of Hume. That's got 81 cases. In the light red there, that is the city of Brimbank. That's got 51. And the municipalities around it, Moonee Valley 31, Moreland 34, and also in the southwest, they're continuing to get worse. City of Wyndham 25, and the city of Melton, that's got 17. And where I live in the southeast near Frankston here, the bright green, that basically means there's 1 or 2 cases. Yep. City of Frankston at the moment, there is 1, but Mornington Peninsula right next door, 0. City of Casey is the only area of concern in the southeast that's not locked down. That it's still a concern that 16 active cases, but neighbouring city of Cardinia, which they were worried about for a while, has got no active cases now. So southeast, things are perfectly fine. Frankston, as the comedians used to mockingly call it, Bougainville. Well, Bougainville is almost free of COVID.
Yeah, and the places where you have the highest level of coronavirus in Melbourne, and I suppose it's really interesting that Melbourne seems to basically be the one city in all of Australia where this is a problem, right?
And we had the harshest lockdown.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing adds up, and this is why you see the rise, the rise of the conspiracy theories and the test refusals, because people start to realize that things are not adding up. So what they've been told, what they've experienced these past months, it can't really be reconciled with the actual outcome, with the actual increase in cases. And then there's nobody there willing to actually delve into the problems. Nobody willing to admit that everything that's been done is not actually based on any empirical evidence, that there's no real precedence here, that it's all made up as they go along. And they can't admit that either, because then their authority falls apart. And so you're stuck in this rolling circle where it's gonna, there's no way out. And this is a real problem that we have in New Zealand as well. And even Helen Clark has just come out. The former Prime Minister, Labour Party Prime Minister Helen Clark, has actually expressed some concern today that there's no exit strategy. So she's been talking about, is New Zealand, and here's a quick quote here from this paper that she was a part of. We need to be thinking about defining our long-term strategy. Is New Zealand prepared to hold itself in its state of near total isolation for the indefinite future? And again, the Trans-Tasman bubble, which we talked about months ago, is gone. Basically, it's not coming back to the end of the year. So New Zealand itself is in a state of quarantine, and the opposition has talked about opening up the border. So National Party is called, okay, we need to open up the border, we need to re-engage with the world, life has to go on. But they're still dealing with the polling issues where opening the borders becomes very unpopular because people are still scared. People still want to remain isolated, and so
well, they discovered governments that closing your borders is a popular policy position.
Exactly, yeah, and obviously the people who are more concerned are the more globalist types who are at the top there, who realize they know how their system works. They understand how their system works, and they understand that it won't survive if the borders stay closed. And so there's going to be a lot more tension there in the coming weeks and in the coming months because there's no way out anymore.
I mentioned that hospitalizations and ICU had risen in Australia, obviously coming from Victoria, and of course we're all told this is to save lives, but of course we've had this discussion previously, at what cost? Because the left have been very good at abstracting the economy, but the economy is workers, small businesses, and if you're locking people up at home, they can become very unpleasant places at times where people are trapped. And even Scott Morrison called it flicking the on and off again switch. We can't do that. The federal government is still determined to reopen. We have to, and it's sad, we have to accept that some people will die of the coronavirus or other illnesses. And do you know how many people have died from the flu in Victoria this winter?
I'm guessing at least a almost near normal number, or
0.
And I'm not sure what that normally is. So it's they haven't registered any.
No, but this is the thing. So we've killed the flu season, but have we killed people and their lives in other ways?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously the case. And if you're looking at the number of excess deaths, or you're looking at the standard number of deaths, and I haven't seen them for Australia or New Zealand, but I've seen them for other countries where there is at least a normal number of people still dying. Right? That's with the coronavirus numbers on top, and it's a case where it's a case where sorry, I've derailed my own train of thought here. I've derailed my own train of thought here a little bit, but that we've got a case where the people are really afraid of dying, essentially. And we have this coming up with this election in New Zealand where one of the referenda is for whether euthanasia should be allowed. And I believe Victoria is the only state in Australia that allows euthanasia as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we allow. Yeah. We're supposed to be saving old people with the lockdown. Yet it's legal for them to kill themselves.
Exactly, and it's got and New Zealand and Victoria very similar abortion laws as well. If you bear that in mind, they've got. But people want to control. People want to control death, and so that's where abortion and euthanasia fit in as well. It becomes controlled death, and what coronavirus does is or any illness, any virus is uncontrolled death, where it's out of your control. You can't see it. It's invisible. If you get sick, if you die, if somebody you know gets sick and dies, there's nothing you can do about it unless you lock everybody into their homes and you can remove that. Then you say to people, there's nobody dying. And we keep presenting these numbers on the show every other show, basically every show we go over these numbers, and every night on TV, and they go over these numbers to say, there's only 0 people died, only 1 person died, and yet at least a normal level, a normal number of people are still dying. So you're not actually reducing overall deaths, but what you have done is you've created the illusion that people can escape death. And that's really where the fear comes down to, and the reason why when you see the polling numbers on whether people are happy with their leaders, unhappy with their leaders, whether they like the lockdown, whether they did, whether they happy to keep the border shut, whatever they've been told will keep them safe, whatever will stop them from dying, becomes the popular thing, because death is the thing that people become the most afraid of.
And I mentioned the state border controls and the refugee flows from Victoria, but the reason why the interstate leaders have these positions is because Victorians from who've been in Victorian hotel quarantine have tested positive in other states. There was a Woolworths worker in a Balmain in Sydney who was working at the self-serve checkout, was diagnosed with coronavirus. And so 50 staff at that store have been told to self-isolate. And in the self-serve, you have them in New Zealand, the self-serve person is constantly going over to help people out. But they weren't tested on their departure from the Victorian hotel quarantine. That's another thing. I mean, we've got all these... testing's no issue now. So surely wouldn't you test the people who... on their way out? And also
we had this in New Zealand. I'm not sure if that was something I really mentioned last week, where they were supposed to be testing every third day when people leave and when people leave before they left. Everyone's supposed to be tested before they leave quarantine, but that hasn't happened in a good percentage of the cases. Whether it was I believe in New Zealand it was 1,000 or so out of many thousands.
Yeah. And Victorian hotel quarantinis, they a third of them refuse to be tested, and
which is fine.
Yeah, the same with the people we were talking about before, the 1,000 who refuse to get tested. As their right to, you can't force, just like you can't force people.
But
to
people are
take
told
a vaccine.
they will be tested. People are told that everybody will be tested, but there's no real. As long as it's not them, it's okay. As long as everybody else.
I think the Victorian Labor Party, they keep remembering this human rights charter of rights and responsibilities that they passed 15 years ago when human rights were cool, that they've got to abide by. So because it is an invasive procedure to get the coronavirus tests, you've got to go up your nose and to get the swab. It's not like a simple sort of saliva test. It's very unpleasant.
Yeah. So
New South Wales, they've got around it by saying that if you refuse a coronavirus test, you'll be locked up in hotel quarantine for another 10 days.
So, and that was probably something that we've talked about before as well, which was to say, okay, well, they could say have extended quarantine, for instance, to say, if you do a test, it's a way to get out of quarantine faster or so on. But again, I don't like that necessarily, because the tests themselves are not necessarily completely reliable, and so it almost becomes more of a formality. But where the outbreaks are does not really seem to be related to how well the testing is going anyway. Not when you have guards who are fornicating with the quarantinis.
And who took it home to their families.
Exactly.
These guards infected them, and when they tested positive, they didn't self-isolate. Well, I don't know, with Victoria Police and Dan Andrews threatening us with fines again, why the police didn't check up on those people and fine them as well? Which I think I said last week as well, but it's worth saying again.
Exactly. And I've seen some pictures of a logo in Australia, and I think this is a good case of the symbolism happens moments where the coronavirus works its way into everyday life.
Yes, the Australian-made logo, the iconic kangaroo, has been replaced by a wattle, which looks like, even though it's gold, looks like the coronavirus.
And of course, the coronavirus comes from the word corona, which means crown, which is usually made of gold anyway. I just thought that was a nice little extra touch where they have the golden,
And
the golden corona.
And also fitting with our new dependent relationship on China as well.
Yes, everything comes together nicely, and this is sort of a nice little image that beautifully sums up the show.
And of course, this cost $10 million to redesign this logo. And well, you could have got somebody on Fiverr or Freelancer to do it for $100.
We say it cost $10 million, but everybody knows that the money doesn't actually get spent on the design. It pays for other things.
Oh, yes, all those planning meetings and focus groups and administrative people, launches and
consultants. Think of all the wonderful jobs that are created and how it's just there to keep the economy going. Somebody in the chat wants me to repeat that. Yes, $10 million.
$10 million.
Yes, $10 million to replace the Australian kangaroo triangle with the Chinese coronavirus.
And it's to sell Australia to the world during when international borders are shut. And if you're trying to entice people to come to your country, maybe don't remind them about why international travel was grounded.
Beautiful. I've got an interesting. You go. You finish this. You wrap this up before
I was going to prompt you to talk about. You mentioned that Parliament's wrapped up before the election, and there's been a bit of departures and trash taking out as well.
That too. I actually just see from the chat here a good wrap up to your Australian symbol there. The AU is very similar to the alpha and the omega symbol in Greek, says Oregon. So you've got your golden coronavirus with the beginning and the end on it. Sometimes it's a bit too transparent. So the cleanup that we're having in New Zealand at the moment, 11 weeks out from the election, we had the Labour Health Minister David Clark. He's gone. And it's been said he won't be getting his job back either. So finally they've swept him out. We've had the former deputy leader of the National Party, Paula Bennett, call it quits as well. So she was. Actually, I don't really know what she's done. You
just have to think of her legacy there.
Yeah, what's her legacy? And she's famous for taking benefits away from poor people. That's what she's famous for. So, and a whole bunch of other things that's inside politics, which doesn't.
Politicians in New Zealand, when they retire, do they get a pension?
Yes, they do. Very nice pension.
Because
I mean, she's been there for 15 years. I'm not sure how many years you have to do to get the pension, but it's not even that many.
So she will be a person who gets quite a lot of welfare.
Yes, that's definitely the case.
Because we used to have a parliamentary pension scheme in Australia, but it was dumped in 2004 by John Howard under pressure from then Labour opposition leader Mark
and it should be. Yeah, it should be dumped in New Zealand as well because they can get the same pension that everybody else gets. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's just 15% super now for our politicians. It's nice work if you can get it. She obviously was very, very well paid. She had a gastric bypass surgery as well, which enabled her to lose a lot of weight. She spent all this time crafting this image for herself. She had been the deputy prime minister for a year, and she was going to become the next deputy prime minister again. And all of that was crushed when Simon Bridges was overthrown. She had been voted out in favor of an inner city liberal, although she was completely liberal herself, but somebody even more progressive
than herself, and she's basically couldn't see her way back in, so she walked out. And then, interestingly, just briefly after that, oh, yeah, and she was also the highest ranking Maori member of the cabinet as well, number 13. So they had been criticized for having a bench that was too white. Not enough diversity on the front bench there, and that was something that Todd Muller was unable to answer as well, trying to come up with excuses instead of saying, "Oh, we just picked the best people for the job." And then to go with we picked the best people for the job. Conveniently, the person that was promoted into her spot was somebody who was Maori as well. So they basically ended up doing a diversity promotion, or at least it looks like a diversity promotion, so that they would still have somebody 13 tops from the spot who could help to bring their diverse brand forward. Simon Bridges, who was told he couldn't have the foreign affairs portfolio, suddenly this week was given the foreign affairs portfolio. So it looks like Todd Muller is backing down. Even inside caucus, he's getting bullied by the former leader a little bit. And then he's also had to become more woke today, where one of his MPs sent out a press conference that said that I've got to find. He said that there were 11,000 people from India, Pakistan, and Korea coming to Dunedin, Invercargill, and Queenstown, which is where this MP's electorate is, Hamish Walker, and he had been told that he was racist for singling out Indians and Pakistanis and Koreans, and then Todd Muller had to announce that he was disappointed with. He is concerned and disappointed about such a press release from one of his MPs. So it's even though they had a positive election result, sorry, not election result, a poll result, it looked like things are going well in the polls. It looks like behind the scenes there's a lot of discontent and still some power struggles going on, and the more conservative faction and the liberal faction seem to be at each other. So that is going to be interesting, especially for the next 11 weeks. Judith Collins, who is sort of a more famous, at least more liked by the Conservatives, even though socially she's actually very liberal as well, but she's known for at least being hard-hitting and not being a wet kind of flip-flopper who wants to please people. She definitely just likes to, she was known as Crusher Collins for being tough on gangs and boy racers and crushing their cars when they broke the law. She actually released a book this week called Pull No Punches, which is selling pretty well as far as I can tell, and she's not, again, afraid to criticize even her current colleagues as well. So it's a busy time in the National Party, and you can tell things are gearing up for the election.
Well, we've got a by-election occurring tomorrow for the federal electorate of Eden Monaro, which was triggered by the resignation of the incumbent Labor member Mike Kelly for health reasons. It used to be known, Eden Monaro, as a bellwether seat, that it went with whoever was in government, and that was the case until Mike Kelly won the seat back off the Liberals in 2016, even though the Liberals formed government after the 2016 federal election, albeit by one seat, and Mike Kelly retained it again at the 2019 election. Though it's another political expression, popular local member, but he had an impressive CV. He was ex-Australian Defence Force personnel, had a reputation for being a collegial worker down the aisle, wasn't really into the political hack games. So the by-election is occurring tomorrow, Saturday, 4th of July, and it's a three-horse race with the major parties. Labor have pre-selected the mayor of Bega, Kirsty McBain. The Liberal candidate is the same that contested the 2019 federal election, Fiona Kotvos, and the Nationals are also running because it's not an incumbent Liberal or National member. Trevor Hicks is the National Party candidate, and the coalition got off to a horror start with this, with Nationals, the New South Wales Nationals leader, Deputy Premier John Barilaro, weighing up whether he'd run, then deciding to withdraw. Then the New South Wales Transport Minister, Liberal Andrew Constance, he announced he was running and then withdrew because quite abusive text messages about him by John Barilaro were published in the newspaper. John Barilaro, he's the member for Monaro, and while Andrew Constance is the member for Bega next door. So they both basically blew each other up, while Labor had pre-selected Kirsty McBain, and she got off to a flying start. And this is the electorate in southeast New South Wales that was affected most by the Black Summer bushfires, and also by the drought caused by the mismanagement of the Murray-Darling basin. So it's been described as an electorate that is hurting. It's pretty much in that part of New South Wales regular campaigning in terms of out on the campaign trail. Just no handshakes, just the elbow handshake, and definitely I don't think no kissing babies. But the polls are quite tight. We won't know until the night. The Uncackables is doing a special live stream which will be on the Unshackled channel. That'll be at 8 p.m. Melbourne time, 2 hours after the polls close, where we've got an idea of where the results are heading. There's 14 candidates there. It's what they say, a Melbourne Cup field of candidates, which it always is at a by-election. But if Labor loses and the Liberals or Nationals gain a seat, increase their majority, that will be quite catastrophic for Anthony Albanese's leadership, because no opposition has lost a seat at a by-election to a government in 100 years. It seems unlikely, based on your descriptions as well, with the infighting going on, and we obviously have a reverse situation here in New Zealand with Labor in power, but the factions that tend to be in more disarray, you almost always will struggle, simply because they're not projecting strength going into an election, and that counts for a lot more than you would think. People like to back the winning horse. I noticed the chat, first half of it, they were talking about steak, and now since we were talking about the new logo, they're talking about gold, the physical one. I love these tangents that the live chat get into. Yeah, exactly. It's nice. Before we wrap it up, since I think we're wrapping up on time this week, which is good, and I did want to briefly ask you about your interview with Katie Hopkins. That was on, was it Thursday night? I'm trying. Wednesday night. Was it? Oh yes, that's right. Wednesday night. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure and enjoyment to interview her. It's one thing to get a big name, but to do a big name justice in an interview, that's another thing. But we got through all the highlights and big events of her career, and she was absolutely lovely, both on and off air. I've said to people, hardly the biggest bitch in Britain, the way that she markets herself. Yes, now on. And I was and I hadn't seen much of of any recent interviews with her. Anyway, I'd seen her be combative, but to see such a nice interview that like you did, and to see
the questions that you asked as well, not just easy questions, going through really digging into some of these issues and some of the trials that she's been through. I thought it was really nicely handled, and it was a really enjoyable interview to watch. And I would recommend anyone who hasn't seen the interview that Tim did with Katie Hopkins on Wednesday, I would suggest you go and watch that after or this weekend sometime. Was definitely very, very interesting.
And she gave me a nice boost on my Parler account because,
Noticed.
well, we actually teed up there the interview. It was the night before she got banned from Twitter, before that all happened. And since she got banned from Twitter, she's basically taken Parler by storm. All of these new accounts and traffic has gone there. You're on there as well. Katie Hopkins, she had 1 million Twitter followers. She's already got, well, nearly a third of it back now. And she shared the interview on Parler, and she's given me a nice launch pad for my following on Parler. I've got about 250 on Parler at the moment, which was nice.
Definitely a good start for you. And I'm on there as well. You can find me at Dieuwe, and you can find Tim at Tim Wilms. Definitely, if you are on Parler, follow us there. I see the chat. Somebody in the chat is asking me about the books behind me. One of them, I've sent some books. Sometimes people send me books to review, and one of them is called China Lied, People Died, and you can buy that from. I've got the.
When you say they send you it to review, that's free.
Yes, these guys do, or well, this guy does. Tross Publishing. So you can go to trosspublishing.com probably, or .co.nz. You'll just type it into Google, and you can find all of these books on their website. And I'm actually going to do some proper reviews on those. But they send me the latest books. And usually they're New Zealand history. There's a few other ones behind there that are New Zealand history, but this one is particularly about the coronavirus, and a little bit of a delve into its origins. So I haven't read the book yet, but I will, and there will be a review for that and a whole bunch of other books on Right Minds eventually.
I think now that you're allowed to purchase any book that you want in New Zealand, the book ban is over. I think a lot of authors, they're eager to get selling their books again. That's probably you've got a lot of deliveries.
Definitely, it's good to have that. Well, thank you all for tuning in this week, and I suppose had a slightly more serious show than last time, especially with being back on the dead horse that is coronavirus again. Who knows what next week will hold, but it's been good. And I've already plugged rightminds.nz. You can go there /donate if you'd like to contribute, and if you've got any last minute super chats, now's your chance.
Yep, and as I've told my audience on Wilms Front, I'll re-announce on Trad Tasman Talk. Wilms Front is back to twice a week now, Mondays and Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. Melbourne time on the Wilms Front YouTube and D Live channel. We didn't get time tonight to discuss. Australia is now entering an arms race with China now. We're sort of the new Cold War, it seems now, because we're getting a missile defense system now. But that's the Australia-China future relationship. That's the topic of the first Wilms Front roundtable discussion show on Monday. So I'll be participating in it as well. I'll be joined by Dave Lee, who's regularly been on Wilms Front. He describes himself as a China bull. He definitely believes that the future of Australia as we know it is under severe threat from China. We've got Dougal Cameron from Carnage House Productions. He certainly takes the best way to a more lighter approach to China. He doesn't think that China is as bad as some of us hysterics claim it is. And we've also got Marcus Fu, who's an Australian Twitter commentator. He himself is of Chinese ethnicity, albeit Malaysian Chinese. So we've got a good mix of panelists there. I'm really looking forward to it. And the reason we're doing Uncockables tomorrow night, not just because of the Eden Monaro by-election, but also because we haven't had one this week because of the XYZ conference. But the Uncockables will be back at its regular time slot of 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time on Thursday on the Uncockables YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Stay safe, stay free.
July to those in the US. It hasn't been cancelled, their 4th of July yet, so enjoy it where you can.
Be thankful that the government will let you celebrate.
Exactly. All right, have a good weekend, everybody.
Good night.